Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Gruver. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I am your co-host, Kathy Gruver.
And I'm Jason Mefford. Welcome back, everybody. Hey, today we thought we'd talk a little bit about identity and ego states.
Oh.
I know, yeah, because we've for some of you that have heard before, the whole model of be, do, have versus have, do, be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want to start off being a certain way, and that kind of gets back to our identity level.
Yep.
And also, as we've talked before about, this is where some of the ego state stuff that we've talked about shows in at this point too, right? Because when we are doing certain things, different ego states or personalities kind of show up. And for me, one of the bigger ahas that I had this last week was in thinking about the being and trying to focus on particular words of how would that person be in using, adjectives and other things, like they would be courageous. Okay, so if I'm going to do something, I should do it courageously. I should be diligent. I should be, conscientious. I should be kind, or whatever the words happen to be. But start thinking about some of those words. And this, again, whole identity thing, because if you want to make change at the top, you got to really change your identity to end up having that stuff come out.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a quick review for people that have not seen the ego state episode, either when I talked about it with the cards or when Mike Mandel was talking about it, we have anywhere between 5 and 15 ego states that sort of take over on a daily basis. We can have up to 50, but oftentimes they're just sitting in the back of the bus. You don't even know they're there. So those 5 to 15 ego states, we can switch those at will, or they switch automatically. So if you start to talk to me about the cat, oh, I'm going to give my little cat, or if my boyfriend and I are like playing roughhousing, it's going to be that little kid thing. Or if you're around kids, sometimes that can trigger that little kid in you. So we have all these personality types, all these little archetypes inside ourselves that can come out and be, quote, executive is what we call them. So who do you want to be? And I think I love this conversation because, I used to be an actor, and I would get the script and I would read the description of the character, and then I would have to spend the next 3 hours in that play as that character. Well, what is that character going to do? How are they going to react? Even if I'm not saying lines. And I remember there was one show I did called But Not Goodbye, where I sat on stage in the background while other conversations happened. It was just a living room scene, but I sat on the stage. I had to be in character. And I had an old Sears catalog, and I was a librarian in the show, and I figured out how much money I made as a librarian, and I added that all up, and I did all the math, and I was flipping through this 1908, which was the year the play was supposed to take place, Sears catalog, planning what I wanted to buy and how long I would have to, and it's like I got so into that character that even though I wasn't, quote, in the scene, I was still there. And if you looked at me at any point, I was still being that character. So what were her characteristics? What were her qualities? Or if it's somebody in my life, like I want to be like, I look to those other speakers. I look to the Brene Browns, and I want to know what characteristics, what qualities do they have that I can imbue myself with to have that level of success. You don't want to mimic them, and you don't want to make every single choice they did, but what are those characteristics? Maybe I want my Wonder Woman character to come out. Maybe I want my Snow White to come out. Maybe what are you tapping into inside yourself that you have that you can bring to executive to be more like that person, so that when you're doing things, you can have that success.
Yeah, because again, it's about, doing those things with those characteristics too, right? And so again, whether it's like we talked before about, hey, if I'm, if we're up giving a speech, well, we don't want, the Star Wars nerd, ego to come out, or we don't want the librarian ego, or, the little boy, scared little boy ego to come out. I need to have rock star come out, right? Because I'm up there entertaining, motivating, helping people transform. That rock star entertainer energy has to come out and has to be present, right? Now, again, as I'm doing that, just like you said with acting, you have to sit there and think, well, how would that person show up? What would they be doing, or how would they be doing it? Right. And so we can take the music example, right? I mean, you can go to, I remember here's an old story. It was Gene Simmons from Kiss. Okay. I remember hearing him on an interview one time, and he was talking about, him and I can't remember if Paul and him were friends at the time or whatever, but some of his friends, they saved up a bunch of money and they went to a concert in Madison Square Garden. And they got there, and it was just a guy sitting on a pillow playing the guitar, just him playing the guitar on the pillow. And it was Donovan. So, I mean, it's like big name person, right? But they walked away from that going, that was not really a concert. Yeah. The guy was amazing, but that wasn't entertainment. That wasn't what they wanted to bring.
Right.
So when Kiss started, whole reasons, a lot of different reasons, but they started doing the painting of their face and spitting blood and fire and doing all these different things in their concerts because they wanted it to be more entertaining. So if they wanted it to be that way, they had to be more entertaining. They had to be more controversial. They had to do some things different if they wanted to kind of have that outcome. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of became this alter ego, if you will, of how they acted on stage. And again, it's, Kiss has got some great songs. They're not the most musically talented or complex, but diehard Kiss fans are diehard Kiss fans. Yeah. And it's because of that entertainment factor. So again, right, if I'm sitting there and I'm going to go out on stage, you might have to look at it and say, well, do I want to be like a Donovan kind of a thing, or do I want to be like Kiss? Yep. Well, either one of them is okay, but I would look at the qualities or characteristics of both of those and then try to incorporate that into making myself be that kind of entertainer to provide that kind of entertainment experience that I want to provide for people.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. They put that makeup on and they became these other people. No, it's Gene Simmons, but it's a different ego state of him. And it's interesting because I always, 90% of the time when I speak, I'm in a dress. 100% of the time when I speak, I'm in heels. I am very comfortable in heels. Heels are my power thing. I walk different. I carry myself different. I feel in control and fabulous when I'm in heels. I go to the Magic Castle, I'm in heels. I feel sexy. I feel this is what heels do to me. I did a conference in Florida called Beachpreneurs. It was a phenomenal experience. Well, we were all casual. We were all in beachwear. So I did my talk in bare feet. It fucked me up because I'm standing there in, I was in a casual dress. I was in bare feet, and literally it felt so weird for me to deliver my normal talk without PowerPoint also, which was like, the Capricorn in me is going, no, I use my PowerPoint. not for no other, except I use it for jokes and things like that. And I was in bare feet. And I have to say, it took me about 15 minutes to get into, because I didn't know who I was, because that trigger, that touch point of I'm on stage in heels, in a nice dress, I didn't have that trigger to switch that ego state. So it was a really interesting experience. So for me, it's like, it's the outfit actually can make me switch states. Music, absolutely. So when I was going for my tax audit, God, please let that never happen again. I wanted to be very direct. I wanted to be very strong. Going to the IRS is not when you show up going, I'm really sorry that I did. I mean, that was a choice I could have made. I was a very cute guy who did the audit. Maybe it would have helped. I did miss a button on my shirt.
Oh, whoops.
I dropped my pen. But it's like, I wanted to show up as hard-ass businesswoman Kathy. So I fucking blared 9 Inch Nails in the car. And by the time I got out of the car and showed up for that audit, I was strong, I was focused, I was ready to, this very person, as opposed to, I don't know where I put that money. I couldn't bring forward the weak ego state at that point. So there's so many, sometimes movies switch me into different states. Like I will walk away from a movie feeling empowered or feeling a certain way, watching certain actors do things. So we have all these great tools of how you can switch states and get to that place that you want to be.
Yeah, well, and that goes back to a term we've used before, anchoring. Yep. Right. So again, when you put on the dress, When you put on the heels, you're anchoring, kind of having that badass speaker Kathy show up by doing it. And that's why when you were in bare feet in a casual dress, it was harder because you'd anchored that ego state to come out by kind of some of the, again, these habits or anchors and things that we're doing to try to make sure that those things show up. You know, and so again, you know, you've got to think about who do you want to be, and what are kind of those characteristics of how you need to do things. And so what can you do to prepare yourself and get yourself into that ego state, or into believing and feeling that identity underneath. And
it was really fascinating. I took a pole dancing class a couple weeks ago, and I always wanted to, and I knew it would be right in my wheelhouse. I've been dancing forever. I've got the trapeze stuff. I don't have a problem being sexy and free. So to me, it was like, oh, no big deal. I'm going to do a pole dancing class. Well, I was with 22 other women who aren't necessarily like that. And it was this like body positive, body awareness thing. And there were some bigger women there, or women who describe themselves as tomboys, who don't have that kind of confidence to be in their body and be sexy. And the owner of the studio, if you didn't already have your own shoes, gave us all 5-inch platform of basically the sluttiest shoes you would ever see. And it was so fascinating because I watched these women put these shoes on, and it transformed them. Because even for me, who's very comfortable in heels, and I just clip-clopped around like normal, didn't really bother me. But it upped your confidence. You looked in the mirror and went, oh, I'm a different person. And I could see these women transform into this completely different character when the music came on and they're spinning around this pole. And it was such an interesting experience for me as an observer, because it didn't shift me much because I'm comfortable in that. It's one of my normal ones anyway. But to watch these women who aren't in that state shift that state, it was really fascinating to me. And, you know, and we talked about this before we got on. It was the WWJD bracelets. What would Jesus do? That means you want to emulate him as a teacher, as a wise person, as a master. So sure, ask that question. What would Jesus do? Or what would Jesus be? Or how would Jesus react? Or not Jesus, whoever, you know, how would Wonder Woman react in that situation? How would, you know, John Bon Jovi act in that situation? You know, it's like
whoever that ideal person is that you're trying to be more like, right? And so again, the traits of that person, not to be them, not to copy them, but to exude those same characteristics that you want to have as well. And, you know, again, all these different anchoring things. I mean, as the more we're talking about this, hopefully everybody can kind of see this, you know, as you're listening to this. I mean, one of the other people that I greatly admire is Mr. Rogers. Okay. And what did Fred Rogers do every single episode? He walked through the front door while he was singing the song. He goes over, he takes off his suit jacket. He puts on a sweater. He goes over and sits down. He takes off his loafers and he puts on sneakers. Okay. So again, in that short time period, right? He's anchoring. Fred Rogers is becoming Mr. Rogers by the anchoring and those things that he's doing. And that's how he did the show. At the end of the show, when the show was over, he did the opposite, right? Put on his shoes, got his suit jacket instead, and walked out the door. And so again, we can think of this, you know, in the same way with us in entertainment, acting, everything else. It's, you know, when you are playing a part, you get into costume. So sometimes the anchoring, just like you said, with the women putting on the shoes, that was getting them into costume to play the role. So there's lots of little things like this. So again, if you're thinking, well, I don't know how to be this or whatever, well, again, sit back, think about, you know, what are some of the people that you would like to be more like or exhibit their characteristics and kind of the way that they do things, and then start doing things for yourself, whether that's listening to music, literally putting on a costume, you know, visualizing certain things, you know, doing some of the easy, you know, awesome anchoring and other stuff that we've done before to get that ego state out front and center that needs to be there while you're performing.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because I know a lot of people who are watching or listening are solopreneurs, they're entrepreneurs, they work from home, maybe they're writers, maybe you're a speaker, I have found that if I get up and try to work in my robe, I am so much less productive. And so one of the tips that a friend of mine had, because he worked from home, is he would get up in the morning, he'd have his breakfast, he'd play with the cat, he would get dressed for work. He would leave his front door, he'd walk around the block, just like Mr. Rogers. He'd arrive back at his front door, and there he was at work.
Mm-hmm.
He would work for the 6 hours, however long he worked. He would leave the house, he would walk around the block, he'd arrive back at home, and it was home. He had to have that shift from leaving the office, or he found that he would get so distracted with house stuff he'd never start, or he would get so obsessed with work stuff he'd never finish. And he realized he had to put those boundaries on that. So getting dressed for work, I'm not going to sit here in the robe and do speaking proposals. I can do answer emails and stuff like that. But if I need to work as professional speaker Kathy, I can't do it sitting in my robe. It has a different feel for me. Mm-hmm. Doesn't bring up my creativity, and my that drive that I know I need to have. So maybe that's something that you can do too, is put on your work clothes, put on a shirt and a nice pair of pants, and do your work that way, and see if that doesn't shift the ego state for you.
Yeah, because, and again, we've thrown out lots of different kind of examples of things you can do. You're never going to know if it works unless you actually try it. Yeah. Okay. And again, for everybody, it's going to be a little different. I do work from home in a more casual way, but I put on my watch every day, right?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need that. I use my nicer pens.
Yeah.
Again, so there's a few things like that again, even though maybe my attire, because I'm in California, I can wear a t-shirt if I want to, right?
Yeah, but you're not in pajamas.
No, I'm not in pajamas, but having even some of those other things, those things work for me.
Yeah.
Because again, when you put on your watch in the morning, or you put on whatever it is, it's again kind of anchoring you into, okay, it's time for Business Jason to show up.
Yep.
Right. So.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
So all we got for this time?
Yeah, I think we're complete on that. Yeah, I mean, we could keep beating it home, but I think everyone's like, okay, we got it. Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, we'll just re-talk about this again in 2 or 3 episodes when
right.
Everybody's forgotten. We're going to say the same stuff up to you over and over again, but
yeah, well, it's important stuff.
It's important stuff, and again, we hearing something multiple times, you get something different out of it every time.
Yeah.
And, I've seen that with myself. I've heard some stuff probably 100 times, but that 101st time, it's like, oh, right. The light bulb goes off, and now I understand it different than I did before. So,
exactly. Well, and it's different timing. It's, maybe you're in a different ego state and can hear it now.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh,
cool.
Getting deep, getting meta on him here.
I can't. Sleepy Kathy's coming to executive.
Okay. All right. With that, then we probably should sign off.
Let's sign off. Go ahead, Jason. Right. You sign off first.
Well, I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com.
And I'm Kathy Gruver. I can be reached at kathygruver.com. So go forth, enjoy your day. Pick what state you want. Find a way to get into the state that's going to be the most optimal for you. And we'll catch you on a future episode of the Fire and Earth podcast.
See ya.